Hello and welcome to another Roofer's Coffee Shop Lunch and Learn. My name is Heidi Ellsworth and I am here today to bring topics that you can share with your team. We hope you all are sitting right now eating lunch, watching this Lunch and Learn, because you're going to learn something that I just found out about, I think is so cool. And that is the deep energy dive that is going on right now across the country for building envelope. Buildings across the country are finding out how can they be more energy efficient, what is happening. And so we brought the experts from Tremco in to really go over our learning objectives with you today and to give you all of the most recent information. So I want to introduce Josh Houk with Tremco, who is going to be talking about this great new practice of the deep energy dive. So Josh, welcome to Roofer's Coffee Shop Lunch and Learn.
Well, good morning, Heidi. Thank you again for having me on. I'm really excited to talk through this with you.
I love this stuff. I've always loved this stuff. And now with all the incentives and everything that's going on out there, it's just finally, it's just taking off. So, but before we get into all of that, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about Tremco and your role.
Sure, absolutely. So again, the name is Josh Houk. I am the director of what we call our My Team program. So My Team stands for My Tremco Envelope Asset Management Program. And really, that is how I got involved with the deep energy retrofit space. So for a long time, Tremco as an organization was broken up into a couple of different segments. So we had a focus in commercial sealants and waterproofing. We had a focus on the roofing side of things, which is, of course, how you and I are talking today.
Yes.
But recently, over the course of the last couple of years, we've become the Tremco Construction Products Group and added some really powerful brands into that mix. So Drive It, Nudura, Will Seal, and many other companies that have really helped us to round out our six-sided building envelope package. And so when we went through and we did that, we realized that we really needed an additional focus on taking roofing's traditional asset management message and bringing it around the side of the building, right? Really applying that same methodology to all six sides. And so that's really where my role was born. I've been doing this for about 3 years. And truthfully, out of anything that I've worked on around this space, deep energy retrofit really stands out as being one of the most exciting future state opportunities we have in the world of asset management.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, talk about ultimate sustainability. How do we maintain and take care of what we already have and make it energy efficient? It makes so much sense.
It's extremely well said. And I think many of our customers have been looking for these types of solutions. I think so many folks out there have heard so much about, environmental, social, governance, ESG type initiatives throughout the Fortune 500 space, as well as stakeholder capitalism and some of these other, maybe call them buzzwords, but really just, I would call it an overall trend that we've seen across multiple different industries. And I think this just really picks up nicely on one of Tremco's core messages. And I think a lot of what our customers are looking for, looking into the future.
I agree so much. So today, for this Lunch and Learn, we have 3 learning objectives. 1, evaluate the building. 2, obtain the energy objectives. And 3, product plus service equals unlocking financing. I love that one. That is going to be really, all of them are going to be so interesting. So let's get started with our first learning objective, which is evaluate the building. So Josh, that is, what we were just talking about, right? We have old buildings that need to be rehabilitated. What does success look like when you are evaluating that building?
Sure. Yeah, that is a great question. And I think the topics that we're going to talk about today and some of the learning objectives that we're going to discuss, I want to be really clear. When it comes to the deep energy retrofit space, it is going to vary massively depending on what market you're in, right? Yeah. Now, the good news is that for this first learning objective, it shouldn't actually be all that different, right? So when we start to talk about some of the financing, when we start to talk about some of the incentive funds, that is going to be very region specific. But as it relates to how we go about evaluating a building, that's relatively standardized. And so from our perspective, we engage a whole host of industry partners, right? So Tremco at its core is a manufacturer, right? Mm-hmm. We certainly have dabbled in understanding sort of the assessment of these different structures, right? Because ultimately that's how we put our solutions packages together. But we really work through third-party building envelope and energy engineers all across the United States and Canada to help us with these initial assessments. Now, to give you an example, in New York City, it's called the IPNA, the Integrated Physical Needs Assessment, and it is the most comprehensive guide to basically evaluating where your building is at today. Not just from, at least in our world, we think a lot about the exterior of building, the air sealing, the thermal transfer through the windows, air leakage around the windows or through any loose gaskets or anything like that. That's really more so our world, but all the stuff on the inside as well, right? So all the mechanical systems, the HVAC efficacy, certainly how water is being used within the structure. So that integrated physical needs assessment really takes a comprehensive look at that. And there are a multitude of firms out there that really specialize that and get into this space. So really, those would be the folks that I would start with anytime we're trying to look at, hey, what does this building really need? Where do I get the most bang for my buck?
That makes sense. So you really need to find the experts, the building envelope experts out there and work with them. So as contractors are listening to this, think about when you get involved with a building management company or facility management or owner, you're going to want to not only be able to go out and evaluate the roof, but you may have potential to get more business around the whole building if you bring these experts in and work with companies, obviously like Tremco. So is the Deep Energy Retrofit Project, when you're looking at that, what are some of the key building considerations of that project? What are those engineers going to be looking for?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's an awesome question. And the thing I would stress more than any other topic in this is there's a lot of different ways to attack this problem, right? So certainly from Tremco's perspective, again, we really focus on the exterior of the building where our products play the most, but that doesn't mean that you need to reskin your building in order to achieve your energy objectives. So being very clear with those consulting engineers, those energy engineers, and of course with the building owner themselves from the offset about what objective are we trying to achieve is absolutely crucial, because that is going to depending on region. You'll hear people throw around terms like passive house, net zero energy structure, things of that nature. And those criteria are going to be very different. Sometimes a building that is a little bit more modern just needs, maybe a minor update to a boiler or a chiller. Maybe it's as simple as swapping out some light bulbs, right, to help get you where you need to go. In other cases, especially as you had mentioned with some of our older structures, East Coast, right, where we had World War I, World War II era construction, you may need to go a little bit deeper in order to achieve those objectives. So the first thing I would say anytime you're sitting down with those critical stakeholders is to really talk through what are my goals, right? Is it purely a function of me figuring out, okay, how do I achieve a certain square footage of carbon per my footprint? Or am I looking for something a little bit different? Is the indoor air quality especially important to me? Because, for certain medical customers that we have, things like mold and air infiltration that cause some of these adverse air conditions are their primary concern. Sometimes it's tenant health, safety, comfort, all that kind of stuff. If you're talking about multi-residential high-rise, you're talking about a student dormitory, right? The folks that are living there, they're those customers, right? For that client. So really determining where those objectives are going to be sort of the initial foray into how you define how you're going to attack this problem.
And when you think about evaluating the building too, many of our contractors on Roofers Coffee Shop are only doing the roof. There are many who are also doing the whole building envelope, but it seems to me that understanding this bigger picture, especially when you bring in the roof, the HVAC system, the siding or cladding, all sides, the waterproofing that may go along with that, windows, it's very important that at least, even if you're not doing building envelope, that you understand the transitions and how the roof works with the walls and the roof works with the HVAC system. And so where do they turn, what is some of your advice to contractors on who do they turn to when they kind of start hearing some of this deep energy review or the deep energy dive, and all of this sustainability?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I think you really articulated the point well, which is there is truly a symbiotic relationship between all these different components, right? So for a long time, I think we all had our areas of expertise. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that, right? We're
Yeah.
all good at what we're good at. But these components have a interrelationship between them, right? So oftentimes a building was designed with a specific purpose in mind. And if you fundamentally change the exterior of that system, the interior may not be set to match, right? So if your internal system is pumping out air 24/7 and all of a sudden you tighten up the interior of that building, well, all that air, all that moisture that's going to be created on side could create a dew point on the inside of the
Yeah.
wall, right? And so obviously that's not what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to keep water out, not create it on the inside. So easy example, right? There's many others, and certainly there are folks way more intelligent and technical than I that could probably do a better job of describing some of those interdependencies between those systems. But again, I would say that it really starts with those types of engineers that have full building envelope experience. I would say to the folks that are more roofing centric in this space, oftentimes any of those larger firms that you're working with that have roof specifying consultants, they have other portions and other divisions within their business that focus on these other areas. At least
Yeah.
that's been my experience, especially in some of the major metropolitan areas. Oftentimes they'll have dedicated energy engineers that not only understand how to do many of these calculations, but also oftentimes understand the local requirements and the objectives that you're trying to achieve. So I would certainly start there, but please, I would highly recommend that if you ever get stuck, reaching out to your local manufacturers. We work with these folks all the time. And certainly we'd love if you work with Tremco, right? But all your manufacturers work with engineers that specify our products on a regular basis. We work with an awesome network of these folks, and we could certainly get you pointed in the right direction.
That's great advice. Great advice. Build your relationships, your network, and then also communicate is what it sounds like. Okay, so our second learning objective is to obtain the energy objectives. And you kind of started on this, Josh, a little bit. I love that. So understanding from the GC, from the engineers, from whoever it may be, what the objectives are, but also kind of, you know, if you're doing the whole building, but even if you're just doing roofing, really understand those state energy level requirements. So how do contractors go about that?
Yeah, so this is where it's going to get a little bit more region specific, and you may have to do a little bit digging. If you're just trying to research on your own, right? You know, of course, Google is your best friend, but it can also take the longest to find something.
Yeah.
So if you do have one of those energy engineering type partners, those folks are going to know for certain, right, what those local regulations are going to be. If you do operate in a market like New York, you're going to find language around their Energy Star score. The New York City collective put together what they call their local law 90, I believe it was 94, 95, that actually set up, right? So if you type in New York City Energy Star score, they have a holistic group of criteria laid out for you, right? Some states are really trying to achieve passive house. Some states have drawn up their own objectives, right? So you may need to go to a government website. Oftentimes you'll find a Department of Environmental Concerns or Justice or something of that nature, right? That's usually the language a lot of these folks use. So that's a great place to start to sort of get a feel for what those are going to be. But as you had mentioned, Heidi, right, there are a lot of questions you could ask your building owner to find out if they really want to go down this route or not. And really understand what is driving the behavior, right? Because again, in New York City, it's local law 97 that is actually going to impose financial fines for not achieving certain objectives, right?
Okay,
so there's a big difference between the carrot and the stick, right?
Yeah.
So if your owner is really looking to do some of those things I had mentioned earlier, better air quality, better tenant health and comfort, something like that, that might be a slightly different conversation than if the goal is I need a certain readout on my square footage of carbon for my footprint.
Mm-hmm. And that's a lot to assess. And so I think it kind of goes back again, as you're talking, as you're working with that network who's working on the building, is to understand the assessments, right? And really understand the priorities of the building owner. I mean, that seems to be a key. Can you kind of just a little bit more, how do they go about that? How do you kind of ask those questions?
Yeah, when you're working with your building owners, right? So again, if we're just going to assume that we're going to find out whatever that energy baseline is, that's great. But a couple of real basics that I like to try and cover with building owners whenever we're having this conversation is, are you looking for both an interior and an exterior renovation, right? That's simple enough. So do you have aesthetic concerns on the exterior of your building? Have you had water intrusion, right? So those are some of the key exterior factors. Nobody knows that better than roofers, right? If you're inside and it's raining on your head, you've got a problem, right? And so you've identified an opportunity at that point. Similarly, many of the facility managers will know pretty intimately what the age and the condition of their internal mechanical systems are going to be. They may have some concerns around that, right? So Tremco has recently invested in a company called Pure Air that actually restores a lot of those systems. We partner with many third-party manufacturers out there who actually are all about repairing and replacing some of those systems if they are truly too far gone. And so, that interior versus exterior relationship is a great place to start. If you want to get a little bit more advanced and you have a good relationship with the owner and they're willing to share some of these things, understanding what their timeline is going to look like is incredibly important, right? For our education and our medical customers, they've been there for a long time typically, and they're going to be there for a long time. So having a 10, 20, or 30-year outlook on what their renovation and remediation schedule is going to be is very different than somebody that bought an investment property that's looking to turn it within 5 to 10 years, right? And again, that's not a commentary on what your objective should be. That's just what is the owner's plan, right? And then the other piece of it that I would try and figure out as well is, what is their plan for ongoing maintenance and service? So I know for some of the roofing contractors out there, as well as for other waterproofers, glazers, folks that we work with out in the industry, some of you folks do that ongoing service and maintenance, others don't, right? But that is actually a key portion in unlocking one of those other objectives that Heidi had mentioned earlier about that ongoing service element can be an absolutely critical component in unlocking the financing moving forward. So again, just to recap real quick, your Energy Star score or whatever that local regulation is, the interior versus the exterior, understanding the overall objectives in terms of the length of time, right? So what is the time horizon that your owner is looking at? And then of course, what is their game plan, either existing or in the future, for the ongoing and maintenance and service of that structure?
And let's be honest, maintenance and service, or a service program for roofing contractors, and I would say for all trade contractors, is golden. It's a great business model and something that should be part of every conversation when you're talking to the building owners, to see how you can help them maintain this great rehabilitation of that building. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about some examples that you've done. So this is going to be our third learning objective, is having product plus service that equals unlocking financing, right?
Sure.
That's so key. And so there are amazing Tremco products out there for the entire building envelope. You have WTI, Weatherproofing Technology Incorporated, that does a lot of the service and maintenance, and also the re-roofing, everything like that. So you kind of put this together into some really interesting proof of concept, to be honest.
Sure.
So let's talk about first the pilot that you recently have done in California.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I would just stress that we are very early days on this thing, right? So the examples are certainly limited. And I think you'll find that around the industry is there are many companies, both on the application side, the engineering side, the manufacturer side, that are all just kind of dipping their toe into the water right now and trying to figure, what should this look like? Where should our price points be at, right? What is the type of value that our owners are most interested in seeing? But as you mentioned, we were fortunate to work with the state of California on a pilot project, which we hope will transition into a much more scalable model across the entire state. I know for California specifically, they are very much interested in looking into their educational sector and really improving, updating, and renovating many of their school systems. So a very exciting opportunity. But we were actually able to pilot it on a multifamily residential project out in Corona del Rey, California. And so that was sort of our first foray into understanding, well, how do we go through and do these assessments? We've been working with some absolutely amazing partners that RMI have been able to help us connect with, and probably too many to list in terms of the amount of different firms that have assisted in the assessment of the structures. Again, some of the 3D scans that we've had to do. But again, that is all about exterior and interior. So for our portion, we were actually able to bring a fairly innovative panelized modular solution to the table, which is a really exciting area, growing area of our business. We've I think have a pretty dialed in value proposition as it relates to the building exterior, at least the vertical facade portion of it. We're still working on those roof panels, so we'll have more to come in that sector. I'm really looking forward to working with some of our partners, certainly that are looking on this call to try and dial in that value proposition as well. But yeah, completely renovating, completely reskinning the structure, all new mechanical systems, and some of the initial predictions or projections or models that they've put on some of the energy savings they're going to be able to generate with this are just outstanding. And I think it's exactly the type of stuff that the state of California was looking for. The question, of course, for all of us in this industry is, can we repeat it, right? So, we can do it by project basis, but can we get into a rhythm where, hey, the scan leads to the solution set, leads to the ongoing maintenance and service, right? So that's really where we're at right now, is can we get a couple of these projects under our belt? Can we figure out what the square footage cost of a renovation of this type should be? And is that something that's going to be palatable to our owner groups moving forward? Especially if the state of California, the state of New York, the city of Toronto, and some of these other major metropolitan areas are willing to throw in a little bit of incentive funding as well.
Yeah. Well, and when you think about it, I'm just so impressed and intrigued by the thought of you coming in with panels and totally reskinning a building. I mean, that is just so new tech. I mean, I know it sounds very simple, but okay, so I have to ask a question because everybody out there is thinking this right now. So as you came up, you reskinned the building, you come up to the roof and wall transitions. Is there anything special or different about how that all works? And how have you done that? Because trust me, there are contractors out there right now who are just like, how does that work?
Yeah, so I will have to reinforce that if you're looking for a technical detail answer from me, I can point you to any number of my teammates to be able to answer that question better than I. But what I will tell you that it is very complicated, and as complicated as it is at least equally as important, right? That we get that detail right, because the roof to wall connection is one of those critical areas, right? Where if you do have ponding water on a structure or on a roof, that can be one of the areas where it's most likely to penetrate. So, and again, I'm sure all the roofers on this call, they know where to look, right? When they're up there chasing leaks on a roof. But what I would say is that those details are incredibly important. They can also be incredibly complex depending on what the mechanical systems on the roof look like, right? So if we're going to reskin a wall or redo a roof or anything like that, many roofers will recognize that a lot of times those mechanical systems are sitting up on the roof. And so we have to be a little bit careful about how we address certainly those types of connections, those details, certainly around the perimeter, how we make the connection with the panel, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, from a technical detail and construction standpoint, that's something that we're learning a little bit more about every day. We're really trying to design our systems as systems, not as just components that are meeting each other. And so that was a huge impetus behind why we combined the Tremco Construction Products Group the way we did, so that we did have that in-house expertise, so that the technical experts from roofing could be talking to the folks on the wall, and that we can provide the right details to make sure we do it right.
So important, so important. So so that was the West Coast pilot. It's super exciting. Let's talk a little bit about the New York pilot that is coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Retrofit New York is arguably one of the most mature programs probably in the entire world in terms of the amount of resources, effort, the legislation that has gone to back it. and just some of the really impressive folks that I've met that are helping to get that program off the ground. And so one of the things that they've really strove to do is make sure that they have a group of aligned, what they call service providers, who are capable of attacking the space. So there's a fairly lengthy vetting process where basically they have essentially a supplier portal, if you will. And contractors can get into that portal, GCs, manufacturers, et cetera, right, can all go apply to be a part of this portal. I believe it's called the NYC Accelerator Program, is how you get engaged with that. But basically you go, you engage with some of these folks that are going to vet these different solutions. And as I had mentioned, it is a fairly robust vetting process. So whatever solution you are bringing to the table, whether that is your labor and expertise in that space, whether it's the product, they are really looking deeply at the price points, about your plans to drive down cost over the course of time, about what the scalability of that operation will be, right? Which is kind of what lent us to the panel piece in the first place, right? So of course, Tremco makes a wide array of different products that can play in this space. But when you talk about repeatability, when you talk about scalability, especially in a challenging urban environment like New York City, what is the solution that makes the most sense? And so I would certainly encourage, if you feel like you're one of those companies out there that has sort of a unique way to attack this market, or you have certain expertise that allows you to be successful in that space, those are the types of partners they're looking for right now. And again, there's a lot of folks trying to dip their toe in the water right now and understand what this might look like moving forward.
This learning objective was product plus service equals unlocking financing. So let's talk a little bit about that, the maintenance, and kind of exactly what do you mean? And, we talked about the two pilots, but now what do you mean by those two things, unlocking financing?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And this is probably, of any of the topics we'll talk about, the most interesting in the way it's evolving really on a week-to-week basis, as far as I can tell. So, of course, there are many considerations when you're talking about the financing available to different building owners. Some of these programs have been in place a long time, right? So certainly the topic of green construction isn't new, right? This is something that I'm sure anybody that's been in the industry for any length of time has been talked about for a long time. The question is, how much money is available to support it? So if you're looking at a market like California or New York or Toronto, these programs are already in place. So for the NYC Accelerator, once you get into that portal, and if an owner chooses to use an approved solution provider that had applied through the portal, then they're actually able to secure gap funding from the state. And so that is the critical process of, hey, look, we will absolutely give you access to these funds in order to help facilitate some of these transitions in the city of New York. But the big thing is you have to use these providers who have agreed to operate at a certain price point and to a certain degree of quality with certain types of technologies, et cetera, et cetera. And again, those vetting processes go deeper than just price. There's supply chain considerations. What was the carbon footprint to get your product there? All those different types of things, right? So it is a fairly robust vetting process, but that's just one example of the gap funding that can be available. There are other lending institutions out there that are specifically green lenders. That's what they specialize in, right? So this is their entire model. And they use, at the beginning, when we talked about that IPNA, that integrated physical needs assessment, they use that to evaluate the risk associated with any given building, right? So if that IPNA comes back, everybody's kind of talking in a common language. They know what the expectations are to reach that energy goal, and they will lend against that. Now, the big difference there, of course, is all this stuff, when you're financing or insuring any project like this, is the longevity of it, right? Anybody who's loaning money against these types of projects isn't doing it for charity. They're doing it eventually to make a return. So what is the best possible way they can ensure that return is there? Well, if you take care of the asset, right? If the longevity of the asset can be justified and proven over the course of 10, 20, 30 years, right? Yeah. Better rates can be achieved, better outcomes can be expected. The operational cost of that building is going to be lower because you put innovative technologies that are improving the energy efficiency of that structure, right? It all contributes to a more solid loan at the end of the day. And so that innovative solution set plus the ongoing maintenance and service is what allows some of those green lending institutions to really throw their money and their backing behind some of these more innovative projects.
Wow. Wow. For our companies out there that are doing full building envelope, you've got to be having this discussion with your customers. No question. For those who maybe are thinking, well, I'm pretty much sticking to the roof, but I'm wanting to get in front of my building owners, you want to build these relationships. So just bring this up. I mean, you could be the hero, just even saying, have you heard or watch this Lunch and Learn? Because this is information that just, I'm sure it's probably on the specification, the architectural level, getting a lot of attention, but it's just now we're really starting to see it through this and through Josh, what you're doing, being able to get it down to the contracting level, where it's just critical that they understand how this is all working.
The applicators are, while they may be closer to the end of the value chain on this piece, right? You guys are uniquely responsible for the installation. It has provided one of the single greatest challenges that we've had up to this point is making sure that when anything happens that's new in construction, somebody has to go first, right? Somebody has to be willing to take on the risk of quoting up these jobs, of being willing to try something different and put up panels in an urbanized environment or something of that nature. And so we are looking for partners, and we're looking for partners that are willing to work with us and share in some of that risk, right? And be willing to attack this space. Because we truly believe that while we're going to certainly make mistakes early on, right? And we are probably going to have some tougher projects, that the potential for growth, right? And again, keeping in mind that the objective is long-term repeatability and scalability, the opportunity is just massive. And I mean, the markets that we're talking about alone could keep any of us busy for a career, right? So it's pretty exciting, pretty scalable stuff. And I think certainly to anybody on this call that's looking maybe in a different way to expand their business or just offer additional value to their owner, right? Maybe you're not the one executing the work, but you want to let them know or inform them that this opportunity is available, that, hey, there are incentive funds out there. Hey, you can really improve your structure. And even if I'm not the guy to do it, I want you to have the best possible customer experience that you can, right? That's a pretty powerful message to be able to deliver to your customer.
It's how you build relationships, long-term relationships. So,
no doubt.
Well, Josh, thank you. Great learning objectives, from evaluating the building to obtaining the energy objectives to putting that product plus service together to unlock financing. I've learned so much. Thank you so much for being here today. This is just great information.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Heidi. I really hope everybody was able to get at least a couple takeaways coming out of today. And as always, if there's anything else either I or Tremco can do to help support, certainly in this space or in any other, really look forward to working with you all.
I love it. And for all of you, if you're wondering, how do I get involved with Tremco? This is really cool stuff, or how do I learn more? Just simply go to the Tremco directory on Roofers Coffee Shop. We'll have information there. There's going to be ongoing articles, all kinds of different things, so you can stay in touch with this initiative. I want to thank you all for being on here today, for watching. Please do me a favor right now, turn around and take a picture of your group or take a picture of yourself watching in the computer and send it in, because we want to buy your next lunch, and one lucky winner will be getting that every month. Let us know how we're doing. What do you like about the topics? What do you would like to see in the future? We love our Lunch and Learns, and we want to make them so that you all love them too, every time. Josh, one last time, thank you so much for being here today.
No, thanks again. Looking forward to talking soon.
Thank you. And we'll see you all on the next Lunch and Learn from Roofers Coffee Shop.